one of the things you talk about, I want to talk about love and this difference between D-love and B-love.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that topic.
Yeah.
I love that topic. Well, when I was looking into the writings of Maslow, I came across a concept called being love. And what does it mean to be love, day in and day out? And he distinguished that from unneeding love. So he distinguished needing love from unneeding love. So when you have needing love, that's more like a need for connection. Like you need to connect with people all the time. You need to constantly have that sort of find people with similar values, similar ideas. But I think be love is a higher form of spiritual love where you can love people even if you don't connect with them. Like you can be with someone even it's the opposite. Like they're on the complete opposite end of a political spectrum from you. It seems unheard of these days that you could love someone who is a complete opposite end of a political spectrum, but you can. There's no rule. There's no like you. God from like thou shalt not love thy neighbor who disagrees with you on this dimension of politics. No, you can. And I think that that's why it's a way of being. It's an attitude. It's a verb, right? Like it's not necessarily a feeling. Yes, you might not feel love for that person, but you can be loving toward that person. You can. I think a big part of be love is what's called a quiet ego, is lowering your ego just enough where you can actually listen to another person's perspective. Because when our ego is in full force and that volume is turned up all the way, we're not listening at all to what the other person is saying. We're already right and they're wrong. Yeah.
Most people are looking at love as something they're trying to extract from another human being. They're trying to get it. They're trying to fill some hole or some need that they have.
The boat has a lot of holes in it.
Yeah, and the idea being like, I will be complete when you complete me. Like when I meet that perfect mate and we're together, then everything is going to be great. As opposed to this idea of be love, where you're exuding it, you're looking to contribute love. And I just know for myself when I descend into self-obsession or I'm, picking my fingernails and gnawing my teeth on whatever, is frustrating me in the moment or why this isn't working out or whatever, like I have to practice the habit of like, how can I contribute? How can I, exude my next encounter with, something positive for that person. And the more that I practice that, this is not my default state, Scott. Like I'm a curmudgeon. No, not at all. I just know that I feel better. The other person feels better. Everything's better. And that self-obsession begins to wane. But it's a practice. It's just like a muscle. It's a habit that I have to cultivate. And more often than not, I don't think about it, or I resist doing it, or I don't want to do it.
I think, how can you integrate it more though into your being? Because I think there's probably really positive aspects of that curmudgeon-y guy. Like you've asked me some really critical questions today, like even just coming back with me some stuff. I wouldn't call it curmudgeon-y at all. That's not what I'm saying. But it's that side of you seeps through sometimes today. And I view it as like, a real positive, because it's like, it's a more critical side of you or more like thoughtful. So I guess just like, how can it be integrated is my question.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm getting at more is, as somebody who is devoted to, trying to self-actualize on some level, I'm constantly, daily, hourly reminded of these default sets that I have, which is to not be grateful, but to be resentful or, to be irritated by other human beings. Like, it's like petty shit, right? But no matter how much devotion I have to personal growth, like this is like, these are weeds that continue to grow up and probably will for the rest of my life, no matter what I do.
Yeah.
But the only solution is to persistently like double down on these habits or these little practices that I know keep those negative behaviors and emotions at bay and, kind of present, a better version of myself. And it's sort of an act as if thing, like
good on you, man.
You fake it until you make it kind of stuff. And that's a whole other sticky wicket. But that seems to work for me. But I guess my question is like, do you ever get to a point where that practice becomes second nature and that default position is no longer the default? Like in your practice of working with lots of people over the years, have you seen that?
Yeah, sometimes I do see it. Sort of an entire way of being is replaced over time through habit change, but not always necessarily. Like you're saying to me that no matter how many podcast interviews you've done, how much you've exercised that way of being, it's still not your default. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
That's fascinating.
But it's also similar to, listen, if I want to be a good runner, I got to go out and run and train. Like I'll never just wake up one day and be good at that thing unless I'm consistently practicing it.
I guess there's a philosophical question here, which no one can answer, which is, at what point have you changed the habits of your personality structure so much that it has now become your new personality?
Right.
I mean, I'm interested.
That's a broader subject of like personality malleability overall.
Yeah. And I've written a bit about the science of that. And there are limits, but we can quite profoundly change. But there are biological temperaments, and I think this is what you're hinting at, that may be you consider your default. People, I have friends, people who they say, I'm biological, I'm an introvert, but in terms of my actions in the world, I'm very extroverted, right? Because there are people I would assume they're extroverted, but they're explaining to me their inner experiences. Biologically, I'm an introvert. And that might not be something that ever goes away, right? But when you're acting extroverted and you're doing those things, is it you or not you? I mean, that's the deep philosophical question there. And I would argue that it's still part of you. It's still an authentic part of you. That you're not faking it. It's just that there are certain default biological temperaments that also exist, but those only influence the sort of probabilities that you will be in a certain mode of being. But it's not saying those other modes of being aren't you. So this gets a little philosophical.
Yeah. I guess an extreme example of that, or a thought experiment, would be to take somebody who is on one far end of the political spectrum, like an AOC or a Bernie Sanders type individual, and that person saying, okay, I'm going to now behave as if I'm the person on the complete opposite end of the political spectrum, and everything that comes out of my mouth and all the content that I consume and all the interactions I'm going to have, I am going to mimic that person on the other end of the spectrum. If they do that long enough, do they ultimately become that person? Do they shift, or will they rubber band back to being that person that they were prior?
As the scientist in me is saying, well, we have to do that experiment.
Right.
We have to do that experiment, but I do think there are ways we can change and grow profoundly. But I think at the end of the day, we have to still be in line with a certain core set of values, or else it won't feel authentic. I wrote about this I pondered this exact question. I wrote a couple articles for The Atlantic about this. Can you change your personality was one, but the other one was, I forget the title of the other one, but it was really much along that exact answering that question, looking at the research. And the research shows that you have people who, even if they're acting in a different way, if it's not in line with their values, they don't feel authentic. There still has to be a reason for why you're doing the personality change. And often the reasons for the personality change are still grounded in your biology. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For me, let's say I set out a goal tomorrow, I want to be a huge asshole. That's my goal. I want to completely change. I'm tired of people pleasing. I'm tired of having to smile all the time when I meet someone. It's exhausting. I want to just become the biggest asshole. And so then I just I look up, who's the biggest asshole in the world, and I mimic them all the time. Will there ever be a point where that will become authentic? And probably not. Probably not. There probably is, you have to change for a reason, right? And some of that does come back to who you actually biologically are to a certain degree.
That's so interesting.
It's a fascinating topic, isn't it? Now, I do think I could use to be like 25% more asshole and like 25% less people pleaser.
Right.
So I think to
and if you're so exhausted by having to smile all the time, then isn't your true self somebody who shouldn't be smiling all the time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was joking about that. I actually love smiling,
Yeah.
but I was just doing a thought experiment. Yeah, but you're right. You're absolutely right.
Like, what is authentic? And it goes back to that question of like, is authenticity a real thing? And what does that mean specifically?
Yeah, I don't think there's a real self. I mean, people in the spiritual world, they get in touch with your real. You listen to meditation things. I disagree with some of the things people say in these meditation apps. Like, am I allowed to disagree with it? Like, they close your eyes. You are enough as it is. It's like, no, you're not. And they'll say things like, your real self is all you need. It's like, no, it's not. I don't know. I don't know. I think we let people off the hook too easily sometimes in the spiritual space, and we don't encourage growth.
Yeah.
But I do believe in growth as well. But I don't think there is that real self. I think there are just multitude of selves, right? And we are constantly shifting between them. We have evolutionary evolved selves, like the kind of self that becomes triggered in a mating context, right? And like that has an old evolutionary foundation going way back. Is that not your true, no, that's a part of you. But I think we have other sides of ourselves. I think we do probably have higher selves. That probably is a coherent construct. Not real self.
You would have to believe in that if you believe in Maslow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is your whole thing.
Yeah. But the idea that the higher self is your real self, I don't agree with that. I think that there are lots of real parts of the organism.
Right. But we all walk around with this delta between the person we actually are and the person we aspire to be. And maybe there's an additional delta in there between the person we are, the person we think we are, which is usually puts a positive spin on who you actually are, and the person we aspire to be, right? So the person we aspire to be, being that higher self that we're all, consciously and unconsciously trying to work towards to reduce that delta.
And then people who have really grandiose ambitions and think that they're capable, because there's something deeper there. It's not just who you want to be, it's who you think you're capable of becoming and you want to be. And it's interesting because, would that be a great tragedy to think in your head that you are capable, that you could be this person, and then find out on your deathbed, like, no, that wasn't possible.
It was never.
That really wasn't you or possible to be you. And then does it feel like you've wasted so much of your life? I mean, these are really deep, profound questions that get at the heart of human existence and what it means to have a human existence. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, that also works in the opposite direction, right? Like, if you have some success, then your sense of personal possibility expands. Yeah,
it does. It really does. I mean, I'm into the growth mindset. I mean, I'm not like a fixed mindset.
What do you mean
guy.
You're on long walks with Angela Duckworth? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. No, we're down with Carol Dweck's work. It makes sense, but it's constantly calibrating.
Yeah, Carol Dweck. Sorry, I misspoke there.
Oh, no problem. No, but Angela talks a lot about growth mindset, so that was apt. That was apt as well. The constant calibration process is key. Constantly grounding yourself in the reality of who you are in your pursuit of who you want to become. Because I think we can get, especially if we get power, and you see that power intoxicates, people, makes them start to think that they're capable of becoming all sorts of things. That makes them have decisions that actually do the exact opposite. It can fool you into thinking you could accomplish all sorts of things, that you get into this kind of mania state. So I think it's tricky because we want to absolutely encourage people to dream and to have high ambitions, but we should also have them constantly calibrate who they are right now and who they really truly are capable of becoming. Because in the long run, being in line with that reality will lead to a better outcome, won't it?
Yeah.
If you're actually in line with who you could become.